Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Carlos again. Let's talk. Boy, do I have a story for you guys. So, we'll call this episode Red Flags because whew, the amount of red flags that I had this week, you think that I don't know. I'd never seen nothing like this before I even heard of it. So, earlier this week, I went to a job interview because, as some of you know, most of you probably don't. I just recently graduated. So now it's time for me to be an adult again and go back to work, right? So I fill out my application online. Not a big deal, right? I submit it. I get a response about a day and a half later requesting an interview. Cool. I'm like, yes. I'm like one for one already. So I'm feeling good about myself. So interview day comes. I get all dressed up. I have my clothes, my tie on. I'm looking all good, right? Check ahead of time to make sure that I know where I'm going, how long it's gonna take. So I leave with plenty of time. I get there maybe 5 to 10 minutes before my interview is supposed to start. Mainly because I missed the building as I drove right past it. I was looking to the left. It was to my right. So I spin around and I get there. I still get there on time. Not a big deal. So it's a secure building. So I ring the bell. Secretary comes up. Can I help you, sir? Yeah, my name's Carlos. I'm here for the interview. Oh, okay. Carlos. So she goes, I don't think you have the right time. I was like, yeah, I do. She's like, well, let me double check. I'm like, okay, go ahead, double check. Do that. Right. So she goes through there. She's like, Carlos. Yeah, I'm like, yeah. She's like, no, you don't have any appointment. So I show her my appointment time on the response, right? She's like, well, that's really strange. She's like, I've never even heard of this. Okay. But she's like, okay, that's fine. Maybe somebody scheduled this and nobody told me. So I said, all right, no problem, right? She's like, well, would you like to speak with the hiring manager? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I wait about 20 minutes. You can tell she's going through everything. She wrote my name down. She's still double checking while she's waiting. Where, man, I can't seem to find this guy's name. I can see she's visually distraught. Like she knows something's not right. So the hiring manager comes out and she sees him, so she takes off. Boom. All you hear is little footsteps. All right. So next thing you know, I hear she thinks she's whispering. She's not. She's like, "Hey, there's a guy here. He says he has an appointment, but we don't have a time for him." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's not whispering. I heard everything." And him thinking he's whispering, he's like, "Well, what's his name?" I'm like, "Well, you really gave it away now." Well, his name's Carlos. Oh, okay. So he comes up to me. I stand up because she introduces me. I shake his hand, and he kind of looks me up and down like I'm like back in the army getting an in-ranks inspection. I'm like, bro, all right. I don't know how I feel about the way you just looked at me, but hey, it's my interview, so we can go through with this, right? So now he's like, "What's your name again?" I was like, "Carlos," and he's like, "We don't have your stuff." And I'm like, "Really?" My job, my mask, and my face is untwisted. And I'm like, "Really?" Right? So he's like, "Well, how did you apply?" So I show him how I applied. I'm not gonna discuss the names of, how I applied and all that stuff. It's not necessary. I show him though my confirmation, and he goes, "Well, that's weird." And in my mind, I'm like, "Yeah, you're telling me, right?" So mind you, I'm like, all right, right. So nobody in there is wearing a mask, but I am because the sign in there says that you have to wear a mask, but nobody's wearing a mask. That probably should have been My second red flag as to the secretary not knowing I was there. That should have, like, right there, I should have had 2 flags. Bing, bing, right? I'm not thinking nothing of it, though. I'm just like, okay. Rough start, but hey, sometimes things happen like that. So we're talking, and he looks, and he's like, man, I don't see your stuff. He's like, but I can't send you away. He's like, you drove all the way down here for an interview. I get that. So I'm like, all right. And I'm all in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is not going to be a normal interview. It's probably going to be some improv. It's probably going to be, you know, half done, we'll say, at best. But I've already made a great impression because I'm out, I'm dressed, I was on time to the time that I was supposed to be there. You know, I have my stuff, I'm ready to go. So he's like, he starts to take me back to his office, and this is really where things really take a turn, right? So myself, the hiring manager, and the secretary walking back there, and he's like, "Hey, go talk to so and so down at HR." And she's like, "Oh, what do I tell her?" He's like, "Tell her that the system ain't working right, and that we have people showing up, and we don't even know about them, and we look really bad right now." And I'm like, "Yo, that's not cool, right?" I mean, I wouldn't be happy about that. I mean, I'm like a potential employee, and I'm listening to you kind of communicate like this. And I guess maybe my eyes or my forehead, maybe I wrinkled my forehead a little bit because he looked at me and he's like, "Oh, I apologize about this. You know, it's just HR has done this before, and I can't believe they did it. And this isn't fair to you. It's not fair to us." And I'm trying to be like, I got you, I got you. In reality, I think I was like, uh huh, oh wow. I think that was, I think my eyes are giving me away at this point because he's kind of looking at me like, whoa, dude, settle down. But in my mind, I'm like, yo, you just threw your HR department under the bus to a potential employee. Another red flag. Apologize about 6 more times. So as we're walking, he takes me into his office. And at this point, I finally kind of get a good glance of him. And I realize that he's in a t-shirt, jeans, and tennis shoes. Granted, I don't know dress code to the company. Maybe it was a relaxed day. I don't know. But what I do know is that the person before me that had spoken to him was also being interviewed. I guess my perspective is if you're interviewing people, you should dress, to part. You don't want your employees dressing to a certain standard and you're in jeans and t-shirts. I don't know. I don't know what the company culture is. I don't know what the company policy is, right? So I'm like, all right. So he starts asking me questions. As he's asking me questions, he goes through the whole normal. Tell me about yourself. Who are you? Blah, 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 blah. So I get to talking, I give my little 30-second intro. I'm sitting there, just snapping all my stuff that I've done, high points, my strengths, so on and so forth. He's kind of listening. He's kind of not. He's got an earpiece in, so he's talking to somebody on the phone. And as he's going through all of his emails trying to find my resume, he starts talking to the person in HR in Spanish. Well, he didn't realize that I speak Spanish because as the conversation's going, he's like, I can't find the stuff. I don't know where it's at. But he's here right now. He's saying this all in Spanish, and I'm like, wow. And I'm sitting there looking at him like, dude, you didn't even bother to think that I might know Spanish. I got it. I don't have an accent. I'm probably dressed up in a manner that says I might not speak Spanish, but you never know, right? I have friends and family that, speak English, Spanish, and you wouldn't even be able to tell it. I got friends that speak multiple languages, and you definitely wouldn't be able to tell with them just because you just don't know, right? All right, so there's the next like bing. I'm like, oh great. So we continue, and he's asking me questions. He's telling me about the position. He's like, he asked me what I know about, the borderland and, supply chain and such. And like I explained to him, I've never worked in the supply chain field on the borderland. I know it more from a theoretical sense than a hands-on sense. And he says, okay. He's like, I get that. You're fresh out of school. So, he has me kind of give my impersonation or my view on what I think happened. So I gave a very, I guess, simple version of it. And I don't think I answered the question very well. But I think he was impressed with some of the other things that I've done. So I think he kind of let it slide, judging by his body language, right? That's neither here nor there. So, he we're talking, he's telling me, what he expects out of an operations manager. Well, the position that was being broadcast wasn't even an operations manager. It was an assistant manager. Shift work. So, evidently, they're not even sure what positions are advertising out there, because he's interviewing me for an operations position, but the position I applied for was assistant manager. So as he's telling me about that, he's like, we want our operations managers to have attention to detail, and that's a direct quote, attention to detail. And I'm like this. Oh, okay, okay. You want somebody that, knows what they're talking about and can find the mistakes before they get out there, right? But in my mind, I'm like, really? Like having enough attention to detail to know when you have a potential employee coming in? I didn't say that. I tried to keep a straight face. I'm hoping that I was poker face through it. But folks that know me will probably be like, Carlos, you more than likely tipped your hand when you started looking at him. So like I got like 6 different responses that's going through my brain, not just the knowing about who's going to be interviewed, knowing what position you're interviewing for, you know, um, just a whole bunch of things is going through my head. And so he says, unfortunately, Carlos, I couldn't find your resume. And I was like, oh, okay, that's no problem. And I said, do you want me to send it to you? How do we get forward? He goes, listen. He goes, this is what we're going to do. He's like, send it to me on email. I was like, okay. He goes, and I'll have a response for you in a week. He goes, because I need somebody in 2 weeks to start working in about 2 weeks. Okay, that sounds fair, right? I said, do you have a business card? No, I don't, actually. We're in your office at your desk, and you're going to tell me that you don't have a business card. And he goes, well, can't you just send it to me right now? By this point in my mind, I've already made my mind up. I'm like, nah, I'm not sending you nothing. We just gonna close this out like 2 gentlemen, and we'll cross paths. Hopefully, we don't have to cross paths again. Right? That's what I meant to say, that we don't cross paths again. So I'm sitting there like, bro, I'm not sending you nothing. So he reads out his email to me, and I sit there and I type it into my little notepad. I don't even save it. I got up, I said, what? He's like, well, I apologize, but I'm running late to another meeting. So, this is going to have to conclude it. Hopefully we get another chance to interview you again with some questions that are more directed to what you've done and not just a general basis. So this dude literally hit me with like every possible red flag possible. Does it really surprise me? Nah, because crazy stuff always happens around me. I'm kind of used to it. So, normally, I sit there, I call one of my friends, and I'm like, hey, man, let me tell you what happens. And he's like, bro, that's crazy. I'm like, you're telling me. So we move on. Moral of the story is, well, there's really no moral to this story. It's just something crazy that happened to me. So I hope you enjoyed this. I try to make it entertaining as best as we can. As always, this is Carlos. Let's talk. Talk to me. I'll talk back. Peace.